Your response to adversity will reveal the resolve of your strength and the content of the character within you. Take it from Ryan Shekell. He was on the top of the world 19 years ago as the captain of his varsity baseball team, and then he was diagnosed with cystic fibrosis and told he would never be able to have children. He's 35 now, and thanks to in vitro fertilization and a supportive and amazing wife, they have two kids and a wonderful perspective on life. He joined me this week to share his inspirational story of overcoming adversity and climbing through and above obstacles. If you're ready to be inspired, I'm Kevin McShann. Let's have this conversation. Hey Ryan, if you're ready, I'll welcome you to the program, and I'm super excited to learn all about your personal and professional life this afternoon. Thanks so much for being here.
Absolutely.
So Ryan, I know that when you were back in college, you were the captain of your varsity baseball team, and you learned that you were diagnosed with the cystic fibrosis. So I'm wondering if you could recount that experience for me and the impact it had on your life, buddy.
Yeah, so that was arguably a turning point in my life. I grew up. Again, thank you so much for having me on your show. I really appreciate it. I'm a fan of your show, and it's a privilege to be on. But I grew up in a small town in Western New York, and I lived a really normal life. I had fantastic family. My parents were together and raised me and my younger brother. And, it really was truly a fantastic childhood. So much so that, one of my goals was to really grow up and just have a family of my own, and kind of give my family the same life that I had. I felt like my childhood was that great, and it was good. So I went through life kind of playing sports as I grew up. Played volleyball, basketball, and baseball in high school. And then, felt like a normal kid, with the exception of, I grew up really skinny. And my doctors always told me, well, you probably have asthma and lactose intolerance. So those were really, my big health issues growing up. And when I was a senior in high school, getting ready to go to college, I was, captain of the baseball team, like I said, and I was getting ready to go play baseball in college, and my pediatrician retired, and I was getting my physicals to get ready for school, and the new pediatrician, my new primary care physician at the time, was looking at my chart and said, you know what? This looks like something I read about in medical school. Can I send you in to get tested for cystic fibrosis? And I was like, whatever, I'm 18 years old. Doesn't really matter too much. So I go into the hospital, and they hook me up to get a sweat test, which is essentially they put like this coil on your arm and make you run on like a treadmill for 30 minutes, and they collect your sweat. Well, that sweat test revealed that I was in fact positive for cystic fibrosis. And to me, an 18-year-old in high school, I didn't know what it was. I had never heard of it. But cystic fibrosis it's a debilitating chronic lung disease that you're born with. 70,000 people in the world have it. And ultimately, the course of the disease, what happens is, once you're diagnosed, you start treatment, and your lung function essentially declines over time until you eventually die from it. So, as it was explained to me, I was in shock, right? I'm an 18-year-old high school senior, my whole life ahead of me. I'm on top of the world. I'm young and naive. I thought I could just take on the world, right? And here I am being told that I have this chronic disease that I'm gonna have to work on my whole life. And I think it was eye opening for sure. It really opened. It allowed me to kind of move into adulthood pretty quickly, taking a lot of responsibility. And one of the big things that I took away from the conversation that I had with the doctor when he initially told me was, I said, well, what does this mean for my future? And he said, well, the average lifespan of someone with cystic fibrosis is 30 to 35 years. So you should at least live to be in your 30s. and that was, I was like, oh, okay. So I said, well, live in my 30s, what about having a family and kids? And one of the big things he said, at this point, I was in pretty good, mental shape. And when he said, 99% of people with cystic fibrosis have this thing called absence of the vas deferens, you're never going to be able to have your own kids. And it was at that moment, honestly, I was on the phone sitting in my kitchen with my mom, and that's really where I broke down. I said, man, it just kind of hit home. Like, one of my goals here was to have this amazing family, and it doesn't sound like I'm going to have that opportunity. So, it helped me grow up real quick. And I remember walking away from that conversation saying, you know what, forget that. I'm gonna build a future for myself, in spite of what's stacked against me.
And that leads into my next question. I wanted to ask about your thoughts on the power of perseverance, because I know that for you turned to fitness to sort of reclaim control of your own destiny. So I'm wondering about your thoughts on the power of perseverance and how you use fitness to sort of discover your identity.
Yeah, that's a great question. So, in a way, I think perseverance is kind of like a muscle, right? I think it's something that has to be worked out and has to be worked on. I don't think that we're born with the ability to persevere, right? So I truly believe, and it's something that's grown over time. I wasn't, when I was diagnosed, I definitely had setbacks. But I truly believe that you have to put yourself in a situation every single day that works that muscle of perseverance. So, I learned pretty quickly that I wasn't the best athlete. I just wasn't. I joke, I played baseball in college. I joked that I wasn't a real athlete. I was just a pitcher. I could just throw a ball hard, So I had to work harder to be successful because I wasn't a real athlete. And like anyone that's trying to overcome anything, I think the more that you put yourself in a situation to overcome even little things in life, that muscle grows and grows and grows, so that when really big adversity strikes, you're ready to overcome that. And like I said, I grew up playing sports. It's a great training ground for perseverance, especially for, a young, strangly, skinny kid like myself trying to, play basketball with some big brunts. It was a big part of my life. So when I really turned to kind of overcoming this decline in lung function, I understood that the only thing that was going to allow me to do it was daily discipline and doing things that I knew were going to be important, right? And that meant, making sure I was doing medication, making sure I was doing lung therapy. And the thing that I found that helped me more than anything was working out. So I always, I'm not a gym rat. I'm not. I don't go for hours at a time, but I do make sure that every day I do something physical. And that may be working out in the gym. I did 5 years of CrossFit. I've worked out in LA Fitness and Gold's Gym, and I've always felt like moving your body allowed you to kind of be the best that you could be. And for me, it really made me feel the best. As your lungs decline, strenuous activity and strenuous workout really kind of is the best therapy, almost more so than the therapy that's prescribed by a doctor, in my opinion. So it was great for the body, great for the mind. And I knew that I had to work harder than most people to achieve the same level of success. So it was just always something that was kind of a part of me. And I think I've learned a lot from it, as well as taking a lot of the health benefits.
And I know that you also turned to training for marathons to find sort of your inner purpose. So I'm wondering if you can expand on that for me.
Yeah, so this was a great, 2020 was crazy for a lot of people in a lot of different ways.
No kidding.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm sure everyone can reflect on 2020 with some sort of story, right? For me, 2020 was a really profound year. So like I said, I was diagnosed with cystic fibrosis in high school. My lung function at the time when I was diagnosed was 70%. Okay. So if you're kind of thinking of that in perspective, 70%, the average person is 100, right? So I was already at a disadvantage. Well, that was 19 years ago. And over the course of the past 19 years, I continued to watch my lung function decline from 70% down to 40%. And at my worst down in the mid 30s. And what that means is that when you go into a cystic fibrosis doctor and you have lung function in the 30s and 40s, that's when they start talking to you about putting your name on the lung transplant sheet. So we started having conversations of, when we might consider that. It's almost impossible to reverse any damage in your lungs with cystic fibrosis. Well, 2020 was a great year. There was a new medication that was released in 2020, and it's called Trikafta by this pharmacy called Vertex. And it's been in the making for a long time. And what it does is it actually addresses the underlying issue in cystic fibrosis. And it gave me this opportunity. I was able to go on it in March, and I was given this opportunity to take a medication that actually reversed lung damage. So within a couple weeks of going on this new medication, my lung function jumped from 40% up to almost 70%. And within 2 weeks, I understood that this was an opportunity I was never going to have again in my life. I would never double my lung function and be given this great chance to do something physically demanding that I never thought I would be able to do. I've always looked up to people who ran marathons and triathlons. I've got a bunch of friends that are, big into the endurance sports. And I always looked at it as this thing that super athletes did, not normal people. So it was a goal of mine to do something physically challenging, to try to raise money for the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation, which so generously donated time, resources to creating this new medication, but also to show people that a normal person can accomplish amazing things. So I decided within 2 weeks of starting this medication that I was going to sign up for an ultra marathon, a 50-kilometer foot race. And don't ask me why I decided to do an ultra. I don't know. Apparently 26 miles wasn't long enough. I had to try to do 31. But it was in a special place to me, Canandaigua Lake. And I really was looking forward to it. So within 2 weeks, I signed up for this ultra marathon. And then over the course of the next 8 months in 2020, which, look, the quarantine lended itself perfectly to it. I had a lot of free time working from home. I ran 1,000 miles in 8 months and ended up in October of this year I finished the 50-kilometer ultra marathon in 6 hours and 36 minutes. And I think we raised $5,000 for the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation through running it, and it was a great experience. It was super emotional to be able to finish that. You know, my wife and kids were waiting for me at the finish line, and I had friends and family come and hold up signs, and it was a great experience. And ironically, you know, even to speak to your adversity, because of COVID, the race was actually canceled. It was supposed to be a sanctioned race, and I ended up just running it on my own, even though it was canceled. So it was a really cool experience.
Well, talk about determination and perseverance. I want to commend you on showing your uh, way through adversity and being an example for the rest of us to follow. It's a really inspirational story, and I wanted to also ask you, Ryan, as you know, I do a lot of work with people with disabilities and making sure that they're fully included in societal life. And I'm curious to get your thoughts on the impact of inclusion and acceptance of all people when it comes to not only people with disabilities, but how do you think we can have a more diverse conversation about inclusion in general?
This is something that's pretty close to my heart as well. I actually, when I was in college, I was studying to be a teacher, and I have my degree in elementary and special education. And I was a special education teacher for 3 years when I graduated, with a focus on autism. And one of the most important things that I think I experienced was my first year as a teacher. I ended up teaching a pull-out room, right? So we took kids from second, third, fourth grade, pulled them out of the classroom, and brought them into their own special education room, right? And I would teach them reading and things of that nature. Well, the next 2 years, I was an inclusion teacher. So I was a teacher in a general classroom, fifth grade, and the special education students were in that classroom. I think that was a profound experience for me because it allowed me to help all the students embrace each other kind of as a family. And kids are really phenomenal in this regard because they're not jaded by society. And it's a really great example to see how a classroom of fifth graders doesn't see diversity the same way as maybe a group of 30 adults does. And I think if we look at children as an example sometimes and how to, you know, kind of have that perspective, I think it's really great. You know, so with that said, inclusion is great. I think exposure is really what brings that about. And I think similar to putting yourself in difficult situations to practice difficult things, I think we really need to go out of our way to create inclusion in our own lives. I think we need to seek out people with different opinions. I think we need to seek out people with different backgrounds. You know, a lot of times you hear, well, you know, at the dinner table, don't talk about, you know, religion or politics, right? It creates issues. And I disagree. I don't think we need to ignore difficult issues that we have differences in. I think we need to embrace them. I think we need to work more on having a conversation in an appropriate way so that we can share our difference of opinion without being judgmental and without being attacking of others.
Absolutely, and I also wanted to get your perspective on having perspective, because I know that you spent some time down there in Atlanta running a successful business, but you decided to come home because you wanted to be closer to family, and you had a personal family situation that drew you back home. So I'm Curious to know your recount of that experience and your thoughts on the importance of having the proper perspective.
Yeah, I think perspective's everything. So, like you said, so I grew up right with a great family life. One of my dreams was to give my children the childhood that I had. Well, when I graduated college, I moved to Atlanta, Georgia. I had an amazing experience there. I made amazing friends. I had a phenomenal career. And then over time, while I was happy, I felt like I wasn't fulfilled as much. I knew that there was something missing. We were taking all of our family vacations to Rochester, New York, right? So most times people take their vacation, to an island or snow skiing, wherever it is. I was taking my family vacations from a great place to what I considered home. And I was sitting with my wife at the time, probably about 6-7 years ago, and we were sitting with my parents, and we said, man, why don't we just live here and vacation somewhere else? We're spending the entire year looking forward to our vacation, going home to see family. Why not live with family and vacation where we want to, some tropical place? So we said, okay, well, are we going to have the same opportunity financially or just success-wise in a career in Rochester, New York, as we would in Atlanta, Georgia, a thriving metropolitan city? And the answer was no. We said, okay, well, we really need to look at our priorities here. And our biggest priority was family. And we love our family over all else. And we said, our parents aren't getting any younger. We had 2 kids, right? So we went through in vitro fertilization, and we were fortunate to have 2 boys. And they were getting older, and they missed seeing their grandparents, and they missed seeing their aunts and uncles. And we said, the most important thing in life is family. So what we need to do is we need to figure out a way to prioritize that. And the best way that we decided to do that was to move closer to home to allow us to do so. So that was really important to us. So we made that decision. I was able to find a job, and I was able to transfer home. In an ironic turn of events, within 6 months of moving home, my dad, who was my best friend, he was diagnosed with a brain tumor, and within 6 months of being diagnosed, he ended up dying of a brain tumor. So we had made this decision to move home, to be in New York and be close to family, so that we could spend our life with family. And we ended up, my dad's life was cut short. And I think it's important to understand that had I not made the decision to prioritize family and chose to stay in Atlanta, I wouldn't have got to spend, the last year of his life with him. I might have got a vacation or 2, but I was able to sit in the hospital for 2 months at the end of his life and hold his hand and talk to him. And I wasn't going to have that opportunity had I not prioritized it. So, while we made the decision to be close to home, to be close to family, in the end, I ended up getting a gift that I never imagined being able to get. And I don't know what I would have done myself if I wasn't near family and able to be a part of my dad's last 6 months.
Thank you very much for sharing what I know is an emotional part of your life and being vulnerable, because I know that probably wasn't an easy story to share, so I appreciate that. So my next question has to do with vulnerability, of course, because I think more than ever this year, I've embraced the whole concept of being vulnerable and being open with emotions and all of that, all of the different machinations that go along with that. So I'm curious to ask you your perspective when it comes to being vulnerable and the power of vulnerability. And I'm wondering if you could recount for me going through the IVF process with your wife and the message you would have for people going through that same experience.
Yeah, I think that vulnerability is important. I think you nailed it. Was it Jimmy V, right? You see the ESPN Jimmy V speech every year. And one of the things that always sticks out is, I think it says, it's been a great day if every day you laugh, you love, and your emotions move you to tears, right? That's everything you can imagine in one day. And I think that's a really powerful perspective to have that I can appreciate that he spoke about. IVF is, man, that's a beast. So I obviously knew when I was diagnosed that I was going to have to, if I was going to have kids, it was either going to be through adoption or IVF. And I was open to it. I had 10 plus years of preparing and thinking about that. Well, obviously my wife, who had been with me for a while, she didn't have the entire childhood that I had. She didn't have, the years from 18 to 25 to really think about the fact that biological children wasn't a possibility. So, while she knew when she married me, I don't think she quite understood the implication of what that would mean. But luckily, she's an amazing person, and one of her superpowers is research, and she's phenomenal. And we took a lot of time looking into options to have kids. Like I said, family was of the utmost importance to us, and one of our goals was to have a beautiful family. So we did a lot of research. We talked to a lot of people, talked to insurance companies. Ultimately, for us, unfortunately, IVF was not covered by insurance. So we had to be really smart about it. We had to look into different grants, different loans. And we ended up finding a really good clinic and a really good program in Atlanta. And it took us 3 tries to have our first child. So strike one, strike two. We were nervous about the third, and it ended up working. We got pregnant with our first child on our 3rd round of IVF. Very successful pregnancy, amazing kid, and then decided to try to have a second child. And we ended up going through 2 more bouts with IVF and had our second child. So I think the main thing with IVF is, it's a long experience, and there's a lot of hormones that are involved. My wife had to shoot herself up with hormone shots, injections, monthly and daily, and it can really play with your emotions. So there's definitely a stigma around IVF, and people want to be supportive and they want to talk. And if you know anyone that's going through IVF, sometimes the best thing is just to say, hey, I'm here for you. You want to talk about it, okay? If not, just know I'm thinking about you. If you need a hug, I'm here. If you need a drink, I'm here. But you never know kind of where someone is in that stage, how many times they may have failed. But there's a lot of pressure in it. It's a lot of money. And the hormones compound all of it. So at times, when it fails, it can feel like the end of the world. And it can really create some depressing emotions. So what I would say to someone that's going through IVF is be patient, and don't go in with realistic expectations, because the majority of people don't get pregnant on the first time. So go into it thinking you might have to do 3, 4, 5 times. And if you get pregnant right away, then great. If it takes you 3, then great. And if it takes you 5, well, hopefully you have the tenacity to keep going, because it is worth it. And the amount of money I spent on IVF, I would trade it tenfold for the kids that I have. It's absolutely the greatest thing in my life.
I'm sure it is, and I'm curious to know, since the process of having kids was such a interesting experience for you. What's the biggest lesson that you think you've learned from your kids?
Oh man. Uh, well, I think a big lesson is no two kids are the same. um, Jeez.
I'm an
Yeah,
identical twin, so I can relate to that.
I can believe it. I can believe it. And you're probably more similar to your twin than two other siblings even. But yeah, I think everyone's an individual, right? And I think it's you want to play into your kids' strengths and then challenge their weaknesses. Like I said about the classroom that I taught, kids are amazing. They come into this world with they're not jaded. There's no bias, right? It's all love. And I think one of the biggest things that I've taken away from not just my kids, but seeing all children, is that it's kind of like you get out what you put in. The more love you put into your kids, the more loving and respectful they're going to be. And if you infuse hate into their lives, and rigidness and anxiety, then they're gonna reflect that back on you and back on the world. And I think it's important to know that they're little sponges, and they're gonna take what you give them. So you have to really treat them the way that they deserve to be treated. They're innocent. They're innocent. But the lesson that I take away from that is try to treat everybody that way, right?
Absolutely. And I'm curious to know, Ryan, after speaking with you for a little bit, I'm curious to know what in life are you most grateful for? And what would be your message to people about living life to the fullest?
Yeah. I'm a very grateful person. I'm optimistic. I honestly try to see the best in life. I'm grateful for a lot. I'm grateful for my wife. She's my best friend. She's my partner. She pushes me to be the best that I can be, which I think is important in a partner. I'm grateful for my kids. I never thought I'd have them. They're my little bundles of joy that I love every day. I'm grateful for my brother, my parents, my family, and friends. I think the most thing I'm grateful most for being diagnosed with cystic fibrosis. It's changed my life, and I say that because being diagnosed with cystic fibrosis, gave me perspective that I never would have received otherwise. When you're told at 18 years old that you have 15, 20 years potentially left to live, it forces you to try to live an entire life in those 15 years. And I've done that. I've tried to squeeze 100 years of life into 15. And being diagnosed with cystic fibrosis gave me the perspective to do that. So, I'm really grateful for that. Now, look, I've surpassed 35. I'm playing with house money. I'm not supposed to be here right now, So essentially, I'm just running up the score, right? So that's all that I have, in terms of gratitude. I'm grateful for every single day because right now, every single day is over and above what I was supposed to have. And I think that's important for everyone to know is that, look, well, I was diagnosed with something, it was a blessing for me because it labeled adversity that I was having in my life. And it truly gave me something to fight against and something to fight for. And no one knows when their last day will be. This year exemplified that more than anything else. I mean, you see, I've heard terrible stories about young people that contracted COVID and died. No one knew we were going to have a pandemic. No one knew that a 35-year-old was going to be able to die of COVID this year. They weren't prepared for it. So I think it's important for everyone to take a step back and just say, when is my last day going to be? Is it going to be 80? Is it going to be 60? Is it going to be 40? You don't know. So try to cram an entire life full of experiences and love and laughter into every single day that you have, because you truly don't know, when it is going to be your last.
Hey Ryan, and I'm gonna combine my last two questions because I think they're interconnected. So, what do you want your legacy to be once your life has reached its ultimate conclusion? And then, just finally, if people want to be connected with you, how can they do that, buddy?
Yeah. So, legacy is an interesting question. Um, Honestly, I don't really care what people remember me as in terms of the public. I just want the people that I know, my friends and family, to know that I love them, that I'm here for them, and that I just want people to see that you can live a full life, you can laugh, you can be successful without any of the externalities that make a lot of people feel like they're successful. I think every life should be judged on how loving they are, how happy they are, and the impact they've made on others. And my goal is ultimately to help others see that there's a reason for living, and just to create more love and compassion in the world. And then look, if people want to get a hold of me, I have a website. It's ryanshekell.com. I'm on all the social media, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. I am coming out with a podcast and writing a book. Not out yet, but love to have people follow along. I guess ryanshekell.com is probably the best way to figure out what I'm doing.
Well, yeah, there's nothing wrong with having a personal brand for sure. Hey, Ryan, I want to really thank you for spending about a half an hour with me for a revealing and consequential conversation. I'm grateful for your time and for being here this afternoon. It's most appreciated.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, Kevin, thank you. And I love what you're doing, and keep it up. Your podcast is great. You're doing great things, and the perspective you bring to people, I think, is phenomenal.